What happens when the wife of a police captain storms into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom and tries to throw her husband's badge on the table like a weapon? You're about to witness one of the boldest, most jaw-dropping acts of entitlement ever caught on camera, and a betrayal so brutal it will freeze the entire courtroom. This isn't just another DUI case. This is the moment a woman who has spent years hiding behind her husband's authority finally learns that some mistakes can't be erased, not with a phone call, not with a badge, and not with intimidation. Before we dive into the full story, tell us where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe to Case Closed so stories like this never get buried. It's a cold Monday morning in Providence Municipal Court, 9:30 a.m. Judge Frank Caprio looks down at one of the heaviest files on his desk. Christine Morrison, age 42, charged with DUI causing serious bodily injury, leaving the scene of an accident, and reckless endangerment. 4 weeks earlier, an elderly couple ended up in the hospital, and a community has been demanding answers ever since. On the evening of October 15th, Christine Morrison left a downtown wine bar where she'd spent 3 hours drinking with friends. Security footage shows her stumbling to her Mercedes SUV, dropping her keys twice before getting in. She drove away at 8:45 p.m. with a blood alcohol level later measured at 0.15, nearly twice the legal limit. At 9:02 p.m., while driving through a residential neighborhood, Christine ran a stop sign at the intersection of Hope Street and Angel Street. She struck a 1998 Honda Civic being driven by Robert Chin, a 73, with his wife Margaret, a 71, in the passenger seat. The impact
was catastrophic. The Chen's car spun 180 degrees and crashed into a telephone pole. Robert suffered 3 broken ribs and a shattered collarbone. Margaret's injuries were worse: fractured hip, broken wrist, and a severe concussion that left her unconscious for nearly an hour. And Christine? She paused for approximately 15 seconds, according to witnesses. Long enough to see the damage, long enough to hear Margaret Chen screaming in pain, long enough to make a choice. She drove away. Police found her Mercedes parked in her garage 40 minutes later, front bumper crumpled, headlights shattered. Christine inside her house pretending to be asleep. Her husband, Police Captain David Morrison, wasn't home. He was working a night shift at the station. When officers arrested her, Christine's first words weren't, "Is anyone hurt?" or "I'm sorry." They were, "Do you know who my husband is?" Now, 4 weeks later, she's standing in Judge Caprio's courtroom, and she's brought that same energy with her. Christine Morrison enters wearing designer clothes that scream money and status. Chanel jacket, expensive jewelry, the kind of outfit that says she's used to being the most important person in any room. Her attorney, Marcus Webb, from one of Providence's most expensive law firms, walks beside her carrying a leather briefcase that probably costs more than most people's monthly car payment. But what catches everyone's attention isn't the clothes or the lawyer, it's the attitude. Christine doesn't walk into the courtroom with the nervous energy most defendants show. She walks in like she's attending a charity luncheon where she's being honored. Head high, expression calm, almost bored. She takes her place at the defendant's table and immediately checks her phone. Not nervously, casually, like she's got better things to do. Judge Caprio watches this entrance with the careful attention he gives every defendant. In 32 years on the bench, he's learned that body language often tells you more than words ever will. And Christine Morrison's body language is screaming one message: "This is a waste of my time." The bailiff calls the case. Judge Caprio reviews the charges out loud, his voice carrying the weight of their seriousness. Driving under the influence causing bodily injury is not a minor traffic violation. It's a crime that could result in years of prison time. Christine's attorney stands immediately, launching into a carefully prepared statement about her client's remorse, her clean record, her contributions to the community. He talks about how she's a devoted wife and mother, how this was completely out of character, how she's already been punished enough by the shame and stress of this situation. It's a good speech, well-rehearsed, professional, the kind of defense that might work on a different judge with a different defendant on a different day. But Judge Caprio has read the police report. He's seen the hospital records, he's reviewed witness statements. And he notices that while her attorney talks about remorse, Christine Morrison herself shows none. She's checking her phone again. Judge Caprio interrupts the attorney mid-sentence. He asks Christine directly, does she understand the severity of what she did? Christine looks up from her phone, slightly annoyed at being addressed. Her response is stunning in its casualness. She says yes, she understands. It was an unfortunate incident. She's very sorry it happened. She's willing to pay whatever restitution is required to make things right. An unfortunate incident, like a fender bender in a parking lot. Not like she nearly killed two elderly people and left them bleeding on the roadside. Judge Caprio asks if Christine remembers leaving the scene.
Her attorney jumps in quickly with an explanation. His client was in shock, traumatized by the accident. She wasn't thinking clearly. She drove home on autopilot, not fully processing what had happened. Judge Caprio asks Christine again directly. He wants to hear from her, not her lawyer. Does she remember the decision to leave the scene? Christine hesitates. For the first time, she looks slightly uncomfortable. She admits that, yes, she remembers. She panicked. She made a terrible decision in a moment of fear. Judge Caprio points out that according to the police report, she was coherent enough to hide her car in her garage, go inside, change clothes, and pretend to be asleep when officers arrived. That doesn't sound like someone too traumatized to think clearly. Christine's attorney objects. He says these are details that can be explained, that trauma affects people in different ways, that his client's mental state was compromised. But Judge Caprio isn't interested in explanations anymore. He asks a simple question. Has Christine Morrison attempted to contact the Chen family to apologize, to check on their recovery? The silence that follows answers the question before her attorney can spin it. No. In 4 weeks since the accident, Christine hasn't reached out once, hasn't apologized, hasn't asked if they're okay. She's been busy with her expensive lawyer, preparing her defense, protecting herself. Judge Caprio reviews the victim impact statement submitted by the Chen family. Robert Chen spent 2 weeks in the hospital. He can no longer lift his grandchildren because of his collarbone injury. Margaret Chen's hip fracture required surgery and extensive rehabilitation. At 71 years old, she may never fully recover. She's terrified to ride in cars now. She has nightmares about the crash. Their medical bills exceed $180,000. Their car was totaled. Their sense of safety is shattered. And the woman who did this to them hasn't even bothered to say she's sorry. Judge Caprio asks Christine directly, why hasn't she reached out to her victims? Christine's answer reveals everything. She says her attorney advised her not to have any contact. Legal strategy, you understand? Any communication could be used against her. Legal strategy. Not human decency, not moral obligation, legal strategy. Judge Caprio's expression hardens. He tells Christine that her legal strategy might protect her in court, but it reveals her character, or lack thereof. And that's when Christine makes her catastrophic mistake. She stands up abruptly, surprising her attorney. Her voice takes on an edge that's been carefully hidden until now. She says that Judge Caprio doesn't understand the situation, that he's making assumptions without knowing all the facts. Judge Caprio asks what facts he's missing. Christine takes a breath, then delivers the line that will define this entire hearing. Your Honor, perhaps you don't know who I am. I'm Christine Morrison. My husband is Captain David Morrison of the Providence Police Department. He's one of the highest-ranking officers in this city. When you start imposing harsh penalties, when you start treating me like some common criminal, you're going to create problems. Problems for you, problems for this court, Problems that could be avoided if we just handle this reasonably." The courtroom goes completely silent. Did she just threaten a judge using her husband's police rank? If you're not subscribed, hit that button right now, because what happens next will be one of the most shocking courtroom moments you'll ever witness. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change. His voice remains calm, almost too calm. He asks Christine to clarify what she just said. Christine, emboldened by what she mistakes for uncertainty, pushes forward. She explains that her husband has relationships throughout the legal system, that he knows prosecutors, judges, police leadership, that it would be better for everyone if this matter was handled with appropriate perspective. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. She's openly threatening the judge with her husband's influence. Her attorney is frantically tugging at her sleeve, trying to get her to sit down and shut up. But Christine is past listening. She's been protected by her husband's badge for too long. She's used it to get out of speeding tickets, to skip lines, to get reservations at full restaurants. In her mind, it's a magic shield that makes problems disappear. Judge Caprio asks a simple question. Is Captain Morrison in the courtroom today? Christine's confidence wavers slightly. She admits that no, he's not here. He's working. Very busy man. Important responsibilities. Judge Caprio's next words send shockwaves through the courtroom. He asks the bailiff to check the gallery. Is there anyone present connected to this case? The bailiff scans the room. Then his expression changes. He nods toward a man sitting in the back row wearing civilian clothes. Judge Caprio asks the man to identify himself. The man stands slowly. He's in his late 40s, fit, carrying himself with military precision. His voice, when he speaks, is steady but heavy with emotion. "Your Honor, I'm Captain David Morrison, Providence Police Department. I'm Christine Morrison's husband." Christine's face drains of all color. Her husband has been here the entire time. He heard everything she said, every threat, every attempt to use his rank. Judge Caprio asks Captain Morrison to approach the bench. The captain walks down the center aisle. Every eye in the courtroom follows him. When he passes his wife, he doesn't look at her. Christine reaches out, tries to grab his arm, but he pulls away without a word. He stands before Judge Caprio with the posture of someone who spent decades in uniform. There's pain in his eyes, shame, but also resolve. Judge Caprio addresses him formally. He acknowledges that this is an unusual situation, but given that Christine just invoked his name and position, he feels it's necessary to give the captain an opportunity to speak. What Captain Morrison says next will be remembered in this courtroom forever. He tells Judge Caprio that he had no idea his wife was going to use his name, that he explicitly told her not to do it, that he's here today not to defend her, but to support the justice system she's trying to manipulate. He's been married to Christine for 17 years. He's watched her become someone he doesn't recognize, someone who thinks rules don't apply to her because she married a man with a badge, someone who's used his position shamelessly, repeatedly, despite his objections. When he found out about the accident, about the elderly couple she hit and abandoned, he was horrified. He immediately contacted his superiors and recused himself from anything related to the case. He wanted no part of covering this up, no matter what his wife expected. He's here today, he says, to tell Judge Caprio something important. He wants this court to know that he doesn't support his wife's actions. He doesn't support her threats. And he wants her to face the full consequences of her choices without any consideration for his position or rank. In fact, he says something that makes Christine physically stagger. He tells Judge Caprio that if the court is wondering whether to impose the maximum penalty, he's here to say, do it. His wife nearly killed 2 innocent people and left them to die. She deserves every consequence the law allows. Christine tries to speak, but Captain Morrison holds up his hand. He's not finished. He tells Judge Caprio about the Chens. He went to visit them in the hospital, not in any official capacity, just as a human being who was ashamed of what his wife did. He apologized to them. He looked Robert Chen in the eye, a 73-year-old man with a Bronze Star from Vietnam, a retired postal worker who spent his life serving others, and he apologized for being married to someone who could do this. Margaret Chen told him something that's haunted him ever since. She said they were coming home from their grandson's birthday party. They'd watched their 7-year-old grandson blow out candles. They were talking about how blessed they were to see him grow up, and then his wife's Mercedes came out of nowhere and took that blessing away. Margaret might never walk without a cane again. Robert can't pick up his grandchildren anymore. Their golden years, which should have been peaceful, are now filled with pain and fear and trauma. And his wife? His wife called it an unfortunate incident and threatened a judge to avoid consequences. Captain Morrison's voice breaks slightly. He tells Judge Caprio that he's filing for divorce. After 17 years of marriage, after everything they'd been through, he can't stay married to someone who could do what she did and show no real remorse. Someone who would threaten a judge. Someone who would use his career, his reputation, his honor as a weapon to avoid accountability.
Gone. Her protection has publicly abandoned her. She's about to face consequences for the first time in her adult life. Judge Caprio thanks Captain Morrison for his testimony. He tells him that his integrity and courage are exactly what law enforcement should represent, that Providence is lucky to have an officer with such moral clarity. Captain Morrison nods, unable to speak. He walks back up the aisle. As he passes his wife, she reaches for him again desperately. He stops, looks at her for a long moment, then says quietly, "I don't know who you are anymore." He leaves the courtroom. Christine is alone at the defendant's table, her expensive attorney suddenly looking a lot less confident. Judge Caprio returns his attention to Christine. His voice is cold steel. He tells her that in his 3 decades on this bench, he's seen many forms of arrogance. But using a police officer's rank to threaten a judge while that officer's husband sits in the gallery, that might be the most shameless display he's ever witnessed. Christine tries to apologize, says she didn't mean it the way it sounded, but Judge Caprio cuts her off. He tells her that her husband is right. She nearly killed 2 elderly people. She left them bleeding and terrified on the side of the road. She hid from consequences, and when finally forced to face justice, she tried to corrupt it by invoking her husband's position. The sentence he delivers is devastating. For driving under the influence, causing bodily injury, maximum fine of $5,000 and 1-year license suspension. For leaving the scene of an accident with injuries, an additional $2,500 fine and mandatory jail time, 60 days to be served on weekends over the next 6 months. For attempting to influence the court through threats and improper use of law enforcement affiliation, 300 hours of community service to be performed at Rhode Island Hospital's Trauma Center, specifically working with accident victims and their families. But Judge Caprio isn't finished. He orders Christine to attend mandatory alcohol counseling for 1 year. He requires her to submit to random alcohol testing. And most significantly, he orders her to write personal letters of apology to Robert and Margaret Chen, to be delivered under court supervision, and to make herself available to meet with them face-to-face if they choose to accept. The total impact? $7,500 in fines, 60 days in jail, 300 hours of service, 1 year without a license, and the public humiliation of having her corruption attempt become part of the court record. Christine's attorney tries to object, calls the sentence excessive. Judge Caprio's response silences the courtroom. He says that Christine Morrison had every advantage: wealth, education, a husband who served his community with honor. She could have been a positive force in Providence. Instead, she became someone who endangers lives, abandons victims, and corrupts justice. The sentence stands. Christine is led away to begin processing. She's crying uncontrollably now, not because she's sorry for what she did to the Chens, but because she's finally facing consequences that her husband's badge can't fix. Within hours, the video goes viral. Police captain's wife threatens judge, husband supports maximum sentence, becomes national news. Captain Morrison is hailed as a hero of integrity. Christine becomes a cautionary tale about privilege and corruption. 3 months into her sentence, something remarkable happens. Christine is working her community service at Rhode Island Hospital when she encounters a familiar face. Margaret Chen is there for a physical therapy appointment. She's walking with a cane, slowly, painfully. When she sees
Christine, she stops. Christine freezes. She's been dreading this moment. She's written the apology letters, as ordered, but the Chens haven't responded. She doesn't know if they've read them. Doesn't know if they'll ever forgive her. Margaret looks at her for a long moment. Then she speaks, her voice quiet but firm. She tells Christine that she's read her letters, that she knows Christine is serving her sentence, that she's heard Christine is attending AA meetings and working in the trauma center. Then Margaret says something that breaks Christine completely. She says she doesn't know if she can ever forgive Christine for what she did. The pain is still too fresh. The fear is still too real. But she can see that Christine is trying to change, and that's more than she expected. Margaret tells Christine about their grandson, the 7-year-old whose birthday party they were returning from that night. He asks about them constantly. He's scared that something will happen to them. He has nightmares. She wants Christine to understand what drunk driving really means. It's not just about the people you hit. It's about everyone who loves them, everyone whose lives are changed forever. Christine can barely speak through her tears. She tells Margaret that she thinks about them every day, that she's so sorry, that she knows it's not enough, but she's trying to become someone who would never do this again. Margaret nods. Then she says something that changes everything. She tells Christine that her husband is a hero, that what Captain Morrison did, standing up in court, supporting justice over his wife, that took more courage than most people ever show. She hopes Christine realizes what an incredible man she lost. Christine does realize. Every single day. 6 months later, Christine completes her sentence. She's sober. She's humble. She's continued volunteering at the trauma center, even after her required hours are finished. She's become someone patients actually trust, someone who can speak about consequences from personal experience. Captain Morrison's divorce is final. He's moved on, dating a fellow officer who shares his values. He never speaks publicly about Christine, but those close to him know he made the right choice. The Chens are recovering slowly. Robert's ribs have healed. Margaret still uses a cane, but her doctors are optimistic. They're both in therapy, working through the trauma. Their grandson sees them regularly now, his nightmares fading. And Christine? She's selling her luxury clothes. She's moved into a modest apartment. She's working a regular job in hospital administration. She rides the bus because she doesn't have a license and doesn't trust herself to drive. She's not the person who walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom threatening him with her husband's badge. She's someone who's learning painfully what it means to be accountable. 1 year after the sentencing, a local news station does a follow-up story. They interview Judge Caprio about the case. He says something that summarizes everything perfectly. Some people need to lose everything before they can find out who they really are. Christine Morrison lost her husband, her freedom, her privilege. But maybe, just maybe, she found something more valuable. She found accountability. And that's worth more than any badge or status symbol ever could be. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible courtroom moments where privilege meets justice and where judges like Frank Caprio prove that no one, no matter whose name they invoke, is above the law. Hit that like button if you believe that threatening a judge using your spouse's position is one of the lowest forms of corruption.
Drop a comment telling us what you think about Captain Morrison's choice to support maximum sentencing for his own wife. Because this story isn't just about one entitled woman facing justice. It's about the courage it takes to choose what's right over what's comfortable. It's about a police captain who loved the law more than he loved protecting someone who didn't deserve protection. And it's about remembering that every badge, every position, every bit of authority comes with responsibility. And some people forget that until they lose everything. Christine Morrison stepped into that courtroom believing her husband's badge could shield her from consequences. But what she found wasn't protection. It was truth. It wasn't rank that mattered. It was integrity. By the time the reality hit her, the damage to her marriage was irreversible. But the chance to reclaim her dignity still stood within reach. That is real justice. That is real accountability. And that is the legacy Judge Frank Caprio leaves behind. Justice with humanity, fairness with compassion, and courage when the world expects compromise. If stories like this move you, if you believe in justice done right, join us. Subscribe now. This is Case Closed, where the legacy of Judge Frank Caprio lives on through every story we tell.